Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I am your host, Sadia, and this is my mother, Ima. Hey, Ima.
Hi, my sweetness. Have you been eating well? You've been taking care of yourself? Been sleeping well?
I
What did
try.
you eat today? What did you have for breakfast?
I think I
What
had
did you for lunch? What did you have
yogurt.
for dinner?
Yogurt. I think I had
That,
two
mm,
Nutri-Grain bars, I think. And then I had some falafel.
well, you better eat better.
I'll
You got to
try.
start those veggies and those fruits and
I do, actually. I eat
balanced meals.
veggies.
After all, I'm a Jewish mother. I've got to get on your case about this.
Yeah, you've never gotten on my case about that stuff. I don't think it's ever an issue. So in today's topic, we're going to talk about the age of getting married. And it's quite interesting because in America, you have 50 states, and I know I'm in Maryland, and the youngest age to get married with parental consent is 16, but the youngest age to get married with parental consent is 12 years old in Massachusetts.
I
Um,
didn't know.
yeah, and we
In Virginia, I think it's 13 or 14, something like that.
I could check.
What is it in Virginia?
Well, the main point we were talking about was we were reading an article about these young couples under 18, Jewish couples in New York City, getting married to each other. And the ages range from 15 to 17 to maybe I think 17 to 21, super young. And a lot of people were very upset with the rabbi. They were trying to put him under investigation to see if he was doing anything illegal or doing any forced marriages. But if you take it under context, where this is a culture of young marriages. I know a lot of times people got married at the age of 17. Uh, when I was growing up in the very ultra Orthodox community. So how far is it to say that at ages of 15 and 16 they can't get married? They should get married. Um, it's just because when you have that kind of situation, people think that, oh, well, they're young, they're dumb, they don't know what they're doing, they're being forced into doing things. But I mean, how much does a 15, 16-year-old American kid start having premarital sex? There's they have that under context. So what does it matter what if they got married? Is that far of a leap to say that they can't do that? And now we're going to have my mother's take on this perspective.
Okay. Well, it's very interesting. We were talking about marriage in different cultures. So I know from friends of mine who live in Israel, evidently among the Hasidim in Israel, young teenage marriages are the norm. Actually, some of the girls are 17. Some of the girls can be as young as 14. And it's an accepted thing in the culture. I know in Iran, I have a friend who's Iranian, and she said that her situation was very unusual from her Iranian friends, in that she went to college and got married in her early 20s, and she and her husband were only 2 years apart. And she says the majority of her Iranian friends will marry men that are 10 to 15, as much as 20 years older, because the idea in Iran is that the husband takes care of his wife, and therefore they marry men that are already totally financially and professionally established. I was reading an interesting article, though, once in National Geographic about a sheep herding community in I think it's in Tibet, in the mountains, and their marriage customs are very unusual. They actually arrange their marriages when the girl is 3 and the boy is 7. And the young couple, until they're able to live independently of their parents, go on and off, alternate between 6 months at the boy's parents, 6 months with the girl's parents. And the couple is raised together to understand that how kids are, they get into fights, they get into this, they get that. They are raised to have to learn how to get along, because this is your life partner. So on one hand, okay, this is their custom. And, of course, we unless, God forbid, you're dealing with a cult of satanic serial killers. If you're dealing with honest people, good honest people, this is their culture. This is their culture, and I don't live there, so as an outsider, I have to respect that. But what I felt badly about for the young people of that particular Tibetan culture was that when you stop to think about the most exciting expectation of your life, besides what profession you're going to have in the future, we all dream about who we're going to marry and the type of family we're going to have. And we grow up really looking forward to this as a very exciting event in our life. And when you do this so early, I mean, a 3-year-old girl, a 7-year-old boy, when this is already established for you, what excitement do you have to look forward to?
Well, my question is that, like, a lot of people would say that, when you're young, you don't really know what you're doing. You have a high, you would think it would have a high probability of divorce. But if you look at it nowadays, people don't get married until their mid 30s, and divorce rates are just as high at 50%. So I really don't think that makes a difference. But yeah, it does take away from that mystery. I think it's kind of a chase that's enjoyable. I know I kind of enjoyed that chase of, like, well, who am I going to marry? Who am I going to date next? Who am I going to be with next? When I was in my early 20s, I think I was more like addicted to that rush and that change, because it's fun, it's exciting. But also, how old were people getting married back in the 60s compared to today? I think back in the 60s, people got married at, like, what age of 18, maybe 20, 25. And,
Yeah,
like,
usually every now and then you would come across couples that were 18, 18 to 20, but the majority of couples in the 60s were getting married, well, early 20s, early mid 20s.
so I guess the marriage age never changed.
Quite honestly, though, like we're talking about like marriage, like you said, but plenty of people there getting married in their 30s, and still the divorce rate is high. Quite honestly, I have seen in my lifetime young people who have made very excellent marriage decisions. And I've seen older people, especially like in their 30s and 40s, who should have known better and made horrible marriage decisions. And I think it's a very individual thing. I think you have some teenagers that they're extremely mature and could conceivably get married at a very young age, and you have other people who, how can I say it, childish adults who never really grew up, who shouldn't even be getting married in their 50s. I don't know. But there was I remember, I don't know if it was you or Yosef, but one of you boys said that one of the rabbis at TA said to them one time that people who get married very, very young, in their late teens, are either rebbish or nebbish.
Interesting. And that's where it takes to such an extreme. I think marriage itself is a crapshoot where you either get someone that's good or you get someone that's broken, and it's best to find someone that's good and not try to find someone broken and try to fix them. But yeah, you're going to say something.
Now I wanted to a couple of things. One of the things I wanted to say is that in the scheme of things, I remember, there are a lot of books and articles and all sorts of, you come across, especially in the women's magazine, especially like in McCall's magazine and everything, all these. I remember when I was in my 30s, 20s, 30s, and 40s, reading all these articles about how to improve your marriage and, do this and do that. And something, relationships are unique. And all these advice articles, don't mean a hill of beans. You have to evaluate your own personal relationship.
Because the thing is that with marriage, everyone wants that perfect answer. Everyone that wants that perfect situation where it's like, well, I did this right and I did that right, and look at these people that have been married for 40 years, and what's the secret to them? There is no secret. It's just a crapshoot, and they got lucky. I mean, that's seriously how I feel. Like, I hope I'm lucky. I hope that's,
But do you know what I've noticed though about all those articles? And at that time, there was also there were some people that were putting pressure at that time on the Rebbeim, because there was a lot of divorce, and there was also a lot of wife abuse. And a lot of the women were putting pressure on some of the leading Rebbeim to take a leadership role, to to have meetings or to give speeches about Shalom Bayis. And what irritated everybody was, and it's not just the Jewish community. I found like all these articles, these women magazines, they were all about pleasing your husband. Not one word in any men's magazines about pleasing your wife. It was all one-sided. It was all on the woman. And so there were some rebellion who tried to approach the men, and the men totally resisted with the excuse, "It nitshayach." So there was some rebellion who decided to have shiurim with the women about Shalom Bayis. And let me tell you, the women walked out of those speeches totally angry and disgusted. It was, put on a shadel, put on makeup, make yourself nicer looking. And we're trying to tell them the only thing that putting on a shadel and makeup has done for some of the women is made them a better target for these abusive husbands.
Well,
You
it's
know,
funny.
this is a serious problem, and it's not being solved by putting on a shadel and makeup.
Well, it's funny you mention that, because on the other side, I remember reading all these Jewish books on marriage, and all it was telling the man to just shut up and just listen to whatever she has to say, and you
Oh,
have
I
no
like that
opinion of
idea.
your
Very
own.
good. Very good. Good advice. Very good advice. I
Yeah.
like that.
It's so,
Don't you like that advice? I think it's perfect.
yeah, it's fantastic. That's what I really want to hear. Yeah, your opinion means nothing to anybody, and you just have to be a blind paycheck. Okay, it's just,
You don't pay me for this. Come on.
no. It's like a lot of men have that resentment, and I think they have to. I don't know. You just have to hopefully be in a situation where you don't have that resentment, or you don't be in a situation where you don't feel like you're being resented, or you have to be resented.
What? I think the conclusion is, let's face it, that every marriage situation is unique, and that all this, you know, it becomes in the end, I find that it's like you can't really go to anybody from advice.
No,
It's like you and your spouse have to work things up for yourself. And if it's an abusive relationship, nothing cures that. You just got to get out of that.
not even that. Abusive relationships, it's hard to even pinpoint, because the way the advice twists and turns, it's more of like, I'll give an example. It says, I think it says in the Torah or in the Tanakh or whatever, it says to leave your family as a man, to a man, leave your family and cling to your wife. Now, if you take that advice, what that's going to do is create isolationist issues and distancing yourself from people that might be there to help you. It's these advices, like, you'll have to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah,
Like,
that is true.
It's and I think letting fear control you in a relationship isn't very good. You want to feel like you should be able to breathe, and that
Sure.
you'll be able to breathe, on a daily basis. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect 24/7, but you should at least be able to breathe. And if you can't breathe, then something's up.
Oh,
That doesn't
definitely.
mean you run to the divorce lawyer and break it off. It means maybe try to figure out what's going on. Speak to the therapist. Speak to your spouse. Your partner. It's like,
But they have to be willing to listen. That's it depends. Like, if they're the type of person that they're willing to listen
yeah,
and
but you're
willing
saying that
to
as if
try to meet you halfway, you've got hope.
you're
But if
saying
they're
that.
not, if they're not that type of person, if they're the type of person who you try to tell them sincerely that something is bothering you, and they just throw it right back at you, oh, it's you, it's your problem type thing, that you're the one that's the problem with it. If they're not willing to sit and listen and try to meet you halfway, I hate to say it, but there's no hope for that relationship, and no therapist is going to help it.
I don't know. That sounds too extreme. I mean, if you think about it, when it comes to like, when it comes to looking at a relationship and saying like, hey, this is a problem. Hey, that's a problem. Hey, I'm always depressed. I'm always upset. Well, that's not my problem. That's your problem. You know what? You want me to solve your problems and solve your everything and being your therapist? Like that creates a horrible, unhealthy relationship that you probably shouldn't go by. Which most therapists say, if someone needs help, they should go to a therapist. You can't really lean on the spouse for your therapeutic issues.
Unless the spouse is the source of the problem.
That's only if the person's constantly victimizing themselves and claiming that that's the problem. It might be someone's personal trauma and they're reliving it and blaming it on the spouse. And then you're going to say, see, the spouse doesn't make me happy.
It's like we said, every relationship is unique.
I understand that.
So it's up to that person. It's up to the person to realize whether or not they're doing that. Maybe a therapist would help them in that arena.
If they went to a decent therapist, they might be able to get healthy and realize their mistakes and realize what they need to work on. And that's
true.
The other thing.
All professions have their good, the bad, ugly, and the criminal. Let's face it, and even among therapists too.
Yeah, but that's the whole thing.
Let's not be innocuous.
You have to be as honest with yourself and critical of yourself as possible if you want something to work. You can't just go ahead and be like, well, it's all their problems, it's all their fault, or they can't make me happy, blah 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 blah.
Well, there's a two-way street. Yes,
it's a two-way street, but it's just that like you have to take control of your own destiny, really.
But I've spoken to so many people though, who, to try to save their marriages, went to therapists, and believe me, it's I hear more. I don't hear any success stories working with these therapists. Very few. The number of success stories that I hear from people I know who had bad marriages, went to therapists, is like very, very negligible or nil. Just
because
I can't give a statistic, but all I know is that I've met so many people who wore out the couch, and the therapist either accomplished nothing or made things that much worse.
I don't know. Maybe you just had bad experiences with therapists. I highly doubt like most therapists, would have those problems. I think there are a lot of good therapists and a lot of good marriage counselors that help people with, stressed out relationships. I think when you have relationships where, the husband's overworked and the wife has been too busy with taking care of kids, and they don't have enough time for each other, and then they can't really take off time of work, and they can't do this, can't do that. They totally forget who they are, and they totally forget who they were with the other person. They wind up being resentful and angry about everything because they feel like they're being used and abused. And they go to therapy, and the therapist just ahead and tries to play the middle ground, but all it does is piss them both off because they don't have the patience or comprehension to do anything. Yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem because those people haven't worked on themselves strong enough or long enough to actually think that, hey, maybe I need to go ahead and take some time to look at myself, be a little more humble, be a little more grateful.
You just kind of like not quite reminded me of something, but what I find is interesting is that I think back to like our grandparents and great grandparents and great great grandparents. The people that were living under the oppression of the Tsar and pogroms, and for those people, they in their relationships, when you read writings, from the people that would say like the 1800s, early 1900s, they didn't look, I don't know what it was, they didn't look for, how can I say it, they didn't
Romance.
They didn't go looking for fulfillment through their married relationships. They were very accepting of, I think they were just happy at the end of the day to be alive and to have food,
because they have their own priorities.
And they didn't go looking for anything more than that, you might say.
I think what it is that there definitely were problems, but you had nowhere else to go, so you kind of made do with what you had. Nowadays, we have a lot of options, which kind of makes us spoiled brats.
Interesting point.
Again, I'm not mocking people that are in horrible relationships nowadays and need to get out of it and wind up being in abusive relationships. That's not what I'm saying. I'm really not. I don't know how else to explain it to people. But what I am saying though is that when you're in a good, healthy relationship and all of a sudden it goes sour and you don't know why it went sour, I mean, at least from my perspective, my experience, it came from being, I guess, caught up with everything else that you forgot to take care of the relationship, because that's what it is. You have to take care of it. but it takes two to tango. It's a two-way street. It's a 2-2-2-2-2, whatever, 2-2-2-2-2. So nothing is definitive. It's none of that.
I'll tell you something funny. Before I got married, I was attending a shir that was being given by a rabbi about marriage, and one of the things it was a mixed crowd of young, single people, men and women, young men and women, and one of the men brought up the point of that in your married relationship that you're not tzaddikim. In other words, you can't be totally religious based all the time. That you have to nourish the relationship by, as a human being, that you have to cater to your wife a little bit, and you also have to have fun. So one of the guys in the crowd said, "Yeah, take your wife out to the circus." And the rabbi said, "Chas v'shalom."
Oh, why? Because taking it to a circus is a bad place to go?
No. He was, they were just joking around. He's about taking your wife out, for
but that's what's sad. That's the saddest story ever. That's supposed to be a joke. No, that's supposed to be a reality. Yes, take your wife out. Take him to the circus.
He was talking about something, that restaurant, nice walk, maybe
a circus
movie, something like that. Circus. He was. But I think he said it because the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey was still in function, and they had just come to the town to where I forgot where the show was. I think it was New York or Baltimore. I forgot where the show was, or Silver Spring, but they just come to that area. So that's when he brought up the idea of taking your wife out to the circus.
Oh yeah. It's such a people. I guess I don't know. I'm not a marriage counselor. I'm just a guy that kind of lived my own life and has my own experiences. But there's always room to work on. There's always stuff to do. It's kind of like when you're improving yourself and working on yourself. I'll give you an example. When it comes to working out, right? When someone's working out, you ask somebody who is super, super fit, you ask them, simple question, what do you hate about your body? They're going to give you a whole long Megillah because they're constantly being critical of themselves and working on themselves, and they see all their problems and faults and whatnot. So too, when it comes to a relationship, if you're constantly looking at the relationship in a good way, where it's like, oh, I need to be more on time, I need to be more attentive, I need to be this, I need more that. Once you have that feeling of you need to do more things for the relationship in a good way, not in a desperate way, not in a sad way, but in a good way, we're like, oh yes, I do need to do that. Oh yes, I do need that. Then I'd say that you would be in a more healthier relationship than somebody who's like, oh, we're fine, everything's gonna be okay, don't worry about it.
There's also something too that I think that throws off a lot of Americans in particular, is that we have this mystique of this, of marriage for love and this beautiful romantic marriage. There's nothing wrong with being romantic, believe me, there's nothing wrong with being in love, that's wonderful. But what people don't realize, love in a marriage is really second on the list. First on the list has got to be respect. Respect is the foundation. And a house cannot
but if someone's
stand
too sensitive,
listen, without a house cannot stand without a foundation. If you don't have mutual respect in a relationship, you don't have a relationship. Period and finished.
Yeah, but if someone's too sensitive, where no matter what you do, they consider it disrespectful, then there's no point. Then that's no point of a relationship.
Then that is, like I said, it's a unique personal problem. I'm talking about in general, that Americans tend to go into marriages with starry eyes and thinking that love is number one. Believe me, love is number two. Respect is number one, first and foremost. But love is a close. Love is a runner-up. It's a close runner-up, but it's a runner-up nevertheless.
But it takes two to tango. And that is the end of our episode.
Takes two to tango. Takes two to tango. Takes two to tango. Takes two to tango.
Thank you for listening to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. Please like and share, and find us on Facebook at Jewish Boy Calls His Mother Podcast. We are looking forward to hearing from you.